If one day your own daughter locked you inside your house, spread lies that you were senile just to steal the home you bought with your late wife's life insurance, what would you do? Stay silent and accept a lifetime of humiliation, or turn despair into a weapon and force them to kneel before justice? Before I tell you how I turned the tables with nothing more than an old brown notebook, please hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, would you choose silence or fight back? I still remember the chill in my chest as I stepped through the doorway of 1745 Cedarwood Lane, a beige two-story house with dark red shingles, the place I once believed would be a haven for my daughter. Just 7 days earlier, I had lain motionless in the recovery ward after a 6-hour heart surgery. The doctor said I was lucky to still breathe the Portland air. I believed him. The scar across my chest still pulled tight under surgical tape, every breath like a tiny blade cutting through muscle. But stepping into the house I had paid for with a lifetime of savings and my late wife's insurance, the physical pain was nothing compared to the words about to come from the mouth of the daughter I had raised for over 30 years. "Sweetheart," I tried to keep my voice gentle, leaning on the armrest of the living room chair. Every muscle trembled as though I had just climbed a construction scaffold. "I'm so thirsty. Could you pour me a glass of water?" Natalie paused in the kitchen doorway. She crossed her arms, her gaze sharp as a blade slicing through the still air. The afternoon light caught the wedding ring on her finger, flashing cold. I pictured the day she had accepted that ring 5 years ago, smiling as I wept in the front pew, telling myself, she has found someone to protect her. That smile was long gone. Her voice came sharp, striking me square in the chest. "We're not your servants." The echo tore the air apart, filling every corner of the walnut-floored living room I had upgraded with my own money. I searched her face for some trace of the little girl who once ran through the backyard clutching dandelions, shouting, "Daddy, flowers for you." But no, before me stood a stranger with eyes colder than anyone on the street. I blinked hard, choking back the breath, tearing at my chest. "I just got out of the hospital. I'm thirsty, that's all." Each word scraped against my wound. Ethan, my son-in-law, sprawled on the gray leather sofa, TV remote in hand like a scepter, his chin lifted with the arrogance of a man who believed he owned the house. The TV blared a mindless game show, fake laughter clashing with the suffocating silence in the room. He didn't bother to look at me. "Kitchen's right there. He's got legs, doesn't he?" Natalie exhaled through clenched teeth, repeating colder than before, "You've got legs. Get it yourself." At that instant, I felt the stitches in my chest rip open. Memories surged. The nights I kept vigil over her fevers, the meals I skipped so she could have tuition, the promises I made to Margaret that I would care for Natalie all my life. All of it shattered in a single line. "We're not your servants." I gripped the chair and forced myself up. The pain seared like electricity through my chest. My vision blurred, but I refused to sit down, not after hearing that. I staggered toward the kitchen. Each step was a knife, but I kept going. The gleaming floors, the cream cabinets, the stainless faucet, all paid for by me, yet I walked like a beggar. My trembling hand reached the glass. Behind me, Natalie sighed, the same exasperated sigh she gave in traffic or long grocery lines. Ethan chuckled hollowly. "Next thing you know, he'll ask us to cook for him too." I let the water flow clear, but on my tongue it tasted bitter, not from the faucet, but from tears mixed with betrayal. When I turned back, Natalie's eyes followed me, not with worry, but with irritation and contempt. At that moment, I knew. This house was no gift of fatherly love. It was a gilded cage where I was nothing but excess. I returned to my chair and sipped. Each swallow burned like ash, but deep inside, something stirred, something I thought I'd lost after surgery, the will to survive. Did they think they could treat me like this without paying a price? Did they mistake my silence for weakness? As the evening shadows stretched across the walls, I realized this betrayal was more than pain. It had awakened a resolve stronger than anything I had known. I set the glass down. My fingers trembled, but my eyes were steady. They had no idea. They would learn. The water slid down my throat, salty as if laced with ashes. No longer the clear water from the faucet I had installed with my own hands, but the taste of betrayal, a bitterness no stream could wash away. The glass clinked against the table, the sound echoing through the silent house like the opening bell of a play where I had unwillingly become the lead. Natalie swept past me, her gray work dress neat, her steps sharp. I remembered those same steps once pattering in plastic sandals across the backyard, sunlight glinting on her hair. Now her glance was harsh, as if I were a squatter in the home I had built and remodeled piece by piece. "Don't overdo it, Dad," she tossed over her shoulder, her tone equal parts annoyance and disdain. "The doctor said you need to move around more to recover anyway." "Getting your own glass is good exercise," I smirked. It sounded reasonable, but I knew the weary disdain in her voice. That wasn't encouragement. It was a justification for refusing a simple act of love. Ethan leaned back, feet propped on the glass coffee table. He sneered, eyes glued to the screen where contestants shouted for prizes. "She's right. You've got to practice walking. Sitting around waiting to be served won't make you any stronger." His voice was flat, but to me it landed like hammer blows to the chest. I had once spent $14,000 so he could have a new Toyota Camry after his old car broke down on the highway. I had drained $20,000 from my retirement so Natalie could attend graduate school, just because she said she wanted a stable career of her own. I had scraped together another $9,000 to remodel the kitchen so she could have the dream kitchen she longed for. And yet now, even pouring me a glass of water had become a burden. I leaned back in the armchair, my heart twisting. The scar across my chest throbbed, but I realized there was a wound deeper still, the wound carved in memory. Everything in this house tied me back to Margaret. The bookshelf where she placed her favorite novels, the mint green curtains she had chosen on a summer afternoon. When I bought Cedarwood Lane with Margaret's life insurance, I thought I was giving Natalie a safe foundation. In truth, I had surrendered my own right to be respected. My eyes fell on the photo frame on the side table. It was our family portrait from Christmas 2018. Margaret smiled gently, her arm wrapped around Natalie's shoulder. I sat beside them, my eyes glowing with happiness, as our family gathered. Twinkling lights sparkled on the tree behind us. For a moment, my heart clenched. If Margaret were still alive, would she ever have allowed our daughter to treat me this way? Outside the window, late April Portland was damp, misty rain streaking the glass in the fading light. In the yard, our neighbor Samuel Carter, a 70-year-old former police officer, hunched over trimming his hedge. I thought of how Samuel, though a stranger, had often paused to hand me a hot coffee whenever he saw me working outside. Yet my own daughter now saw pouring her father a glass of water as an inconvenience. The irony cut deep. I drew a slow breath and kept my tone steady. "Natalie, Ethan, I know surgery has left me looking weak, but I'm not making excuses. I just need a little help. One glass of water is nothing compared to everything we've been through together as a family." Natalie turned, her eyes cold. "Stop dragging up the past. This is our house, and you're just staying here. You should know your place. Our house." Those words struck me like a bullet. I remembered the day I signed the transfer papers. Attorney Richard Hale had asked if I was sure. I nodded, believing I was protecting my daughter after Margaret's death. Now those signatures had become shackles, binding me as a guest in the very house where I had once built my dreams. Ethan flipped the channel, shrugged. "We're not babysitters. You'd better learn to take care of yourself." The sooner, the better. I didn't answer. Instead, I sipped the bitter water again, letting the pain spread through my chest and belly. But in my mind, a spark flared. If they had forgotten everything I had done, then I would make them remember not only with words, but with the law and with justice. The bitter glass in my hand became a silent vow. This house was not just wood, brick, and shingles. It was Margaret's legacy, built from my sweat and tears. And if I had to, I would remind Natalie and Ethan that the man they dismissed still had the strength to turn the tables. Before deciding on Cedarwood Lane, Margaret and I had another home. It was a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet Portland suburb, lined with old maple trees. That home had been our anchor for nearly 30 years of marriage. Natalie learned to walk in its living room, blew out her 18th birthday candles beneath its porch lights. But after Margaret's death, the house became a hollow shell. Every corner, every chair carried her ghost. I woke alone in a bedroom too wide, descended into a silent kitchen where the laughter of years past echoed only in memory. I tried to stay, but the pain grew sharper. I sold that little house. The proceeds, along with Margaret's insurance and my retirement savings, were enough to find a new home, not for me, but for Natalie. I thought, instead of living with memories, let Margaret's money become a fresh start for our daughter. Cedarwood Lane seemed perfect. A new house, spacious, a place for Natalie and Ethan to build their future. A place where Margaret, from somewhere above, could rest easy, knowing her daughter was safe. And I believed that by giving this home to Natalie, I was honoring my promise to my late wife. That night, I could not sleep. Portland rain drummed on the roof, each drop a dark refrain to the turmoil in my mind. Each time I closed my eyes, Margaret's face returned, her gentle eyes, her warm hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Arthur, promise me, no matter what, you will take care of Natalie." That promise had burned in my heart for 5 years since her passing. It was what led me to the greatest decision of my life, buying Cedarwood Lane, giving it to Natalie as a gift, a wall to protect her from life's storms. I remembered the June morning in 2020, when I walked into the real estate office with Margaret's life insurance papers still crisp in my folder. $370,000 from the policy, plus more than $110,000 from my retirement, enough to cover nearly the entire price of the house, a 2-story, 3-bedroom with an office, a backyard, and a modern kitchen. It wasn't a mansion, but it was the dream of any middle-class family in Portland. "Natalie, this is your chance," I told her that day as I showed her the house. Her eyes sparkled, her hand trembled as she touched the beige walls, the granite kitchen island. "Dad, you don't need to do this," she whispered, tears brimming. "Ethan and we can't accept something so big." I put my arm around her shoulders and smiled. "This isn't just a gift. This is your mother's wish. She wanted you safe, with a place to build your future. You must accept it, because this is how she stays with you." On signing day, attorney Richard Hale laid the documents before me. He asked again and again, "Arthur, are you sure?" "Once you sign, the house will be in Natalie and Ethan's names." I nodded without hesitation. Richard, with 20 years of experience, had suggested keeping a reversion clause, a safeguard in case of drastic change. I waved it off, thinking only, "This is my daughter. I'll never need it." Now, sitting in the dark of the living room, I finally understood the folly of a father's blind trust. It wasn't only the house. Every past sacrifice loomed before me. I remembered the night Natalie called, her voice trembling. "Dad, I want to get my master's in marketing, but tuition is $20,000. Ethan and I can't afford it." I sold my old Ford pickup, the truck that had carried me through years of construction jobs, to send her the money. "Just focus on studying, don't worry," I told her. Her answer was a sobbing thank you. Or the time Ethan lost his job, and their Camry broke down on I-84. I withdrew $14,000 from my retirement and handed him a check. "So my son-in-law can get to interviews, can keep supporting the family," I told myself. Ethan shook my hand, promising he would never forget. Today, that handshake was nothing but a cruel joke. Then when Natalie wanted to remodel the kitchen, saying, "A new kitchen will help me feel warm again after Mom's death," I agreed, paying $9,000 to the contractor. I can still see the new tiles gleaming under the lights, my chest swelling with satisfaction. My daughter had a beautiful place to cook, to build her family. But now it was that very kitchen where Natalie stood, with her arms crossed and a cold stare, telling me I had legs, so get the water myself. I shook my head and gave a dry laugh in the dark. Perhaps I had given too much, to the point my children no longer saw it as love, but as my automatic duty. Outside, the rain kept falling. I heard Ethan's footsteps on the upstairs floor, a bedroom door slamming, then Natalie's muttering somewhere. The house I once believed was a haven now echoed with strange, frigid sounds. I felt like a lost guest sleeping over in the very place I had built. A rough cough slipped from my throat. The incision tugged sharply, and I pressed a hand to my chest. But in that moment, I remembered Richard Hale's words on signing day. If things change, if your daughter fails her duty, you still have the right to take it back. Do not forget this, Arthur. I had ignored it back then. Now those words were the only life preserver in a sea of disappointment. I exhaled softly and lifted Margaret's photo from the side table into my lap. Her smile in the picture shone like a lamp, lighting the resolve inside me. "Rest easy, Margaret," I whispered. I promised I would care for our daughter. But if she forgets how to be a decent person, I will teach her the lesson she deserves. And for the first time in days, I felt my heart, scarred as it was, beat stronger. The next morning, I woke to Portland's pale early summer light. The pain from the incision was still there, a dull knife, but I had grown used to it. I sat up and looked around the room Margaret had once chosen in soothing beige, now a battlefield in my mind. On the small wooden bedside table, her photo still watched me with gentle eyes, urging, "Arthur, you cannot let this go any further." I pulled on a cardigan and walked slowly to the kitchen. Natalie and Ethan had left for work. The house was silent. I poured myself a black coffee and took a sip, its bitterness quickening my heartbeat in a new way, not yesterday's bitterness, but the bitterness of resolve. At 7:30, I picked up the phone. My fingers trembled not from age or surgery, but because I knew this call could change everything. I dialed Richard Hale, the attorney who had been with me for many years, from when Margaret and I discussed our wills to the day we transferred Cedarwood Lane. After 3 rings, his voice came, warm and steady. "Arthur, I'm here. Are you holding up?" I hesitated a few seconds, then drew a deep breath. "Richard, I need to see you. As soon as possible. It's about the house, and about Natalie and Ethan." A beat of silence, then. "I understand. Can you come to my office this morning? If not, I'll arrange to come to you. I can still drive? Let's meet at your office." The road to Richard's practice ran through downtown Portland, beside Tom McCall Waterfront Park. I drove my old sedan. Each turn sent a jab through my chest, but I kept the wheel steady. In my head, I replayed Richard's words from years ago. "I'll add a reversion clause to protect you in case your children forget their duty." I had smiled then, thinking he was overcautious. Now that sentence was the only thing I could cling to. Richard greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a small conference room where light pooled over an oak table stacked with files. He opened his briefcase and pulled out an old packet. "I guess this was why you called. Here's the copy of the 2020 Cedarwood Lane transfer." I nodded, eyes locked on each line. Richard pointed to a small printed paragraph. "In the event the gift recipients, Haley Richardson and Keon Richardson, original version, breach family obligations by failing to provide housing and reasonable care to the donor, Arthur Richardson, title to the property shall automatically revert to the donor. After a notice period of 30 days, I felt my heart thump. "Richard, this means," he met my eyes, voice certain, "it means that house is still yours, in the eyes of the law. Natalie and Ethan are there only conditionally. obliged to treat you with respect and provide minimal care. Once they fail, you can take title back. I sat in silence. Yesterday's images flooded back. Natalie's folded arms and knife-edged eyes, Ethan's mocking laugh, the charge that we're not your servants. Each memory pinned me like a nail, but now I held the hammer. Justice. But Richard, I said softly, how do we prove it? They can deny it, say I'm making it up, say I'm confused after surgery. Richard smiled slightly. Have you forgotten what I did before law? I was a prosecutor. I know how to prove truth. You need evidence. Audio of their words, texts, emails, or witnesses. Even a neighbor can testify if they've seen how you're treated. I nodded, a new light rising in me. If I have enough, how long until I can act? Only 30 days from the notice filing, and in serious cases the court may shorten it. He slid the file to me. Arthur, I don't encourage family litigation, but when they've made you a prisoner in your own home, you must stand up. I lifted the file, feeling as if I were holding a weapon. Dry paper had become a shield, and a blade to win back my dignity. Before I left, Richard set a hand on my shoulder. Arthur, be ready. Your daughter and son-in-law will push back, but I'm here, and the law is here. Remember, you are not powerless. Back at Cedarwood Lane, I parked at the gate and sat for a few minutes. The house stood there, peaceful with a red roof and white windows. I no longer looked at it with sorrow. It was a battlefield now, and I had a plan. I stepped inside, my shoes tapping the wood floor. Natalie sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and snapped, Where have you been all morning? I smiled lightly for the first time in days. I went to see an old friend, and he reminded me, some gifts, when treated with contempt, can be taken back. Natalie frowned, but I did not explain. I went straight upstairs, buoyed by a new certainty. This fight was no longer hopeless. The law stood behind me. Second test. The next day, Portland lay under a thin veil of mist, the damp chill of the Pacific Northwest. I woke earlier than usual, not from pain, but because I had a plan. Richard Hale's words echoed, You need evidence. Don't just tell, let them say it themselves. I sat at the desk in my bedroom, opened a drawer, and took out a small recorder. It had been a birthday gift I gave Margaret, because she loved taping Natalie's childhood songs. After her passing, I kept it in a wooden box, never imagining it would become a weapon. I plugged it in, tested it, the tiny click, the red light. Even my soft cough played back, crystal clear. Perfect. The morning passed quietly. Natalie came home early in a pale pink blouse, a shopping bag in hand. Ethan sprawled on the sofa, flipping channels. I descended the stairs, each step heavy as if walking itself took half my strength. In truth, I wanted them to see my weakness. Honey, I said just loud enough, I'm a little thirsty. Could you pour me a glass of water? Natalie paused, annoyance flashing in her eyes. She set the bag down and folded her arms. Are we doing this again? You can do it yourself. Why do you insist on torturing me with petty things? I kept my face calm, but my heart pounded. Her voice was clear, perfect for the recorder hidden in my coat pocket to catch every word. Ethan snorted, eyes glued to the TV. Natalie, ignore it. He's just plain weak to be served. Heart surgery, not a broken leg. I took one more step and set my hand on the chair. I only wanted to see if you remember the nights I fed you when you had a fever, or how I drove 3 hours to take you to college. 1 glass of water isn't much. Natalie cut me off, voice rising. Stop bringing up the past. You did those things because you wanted to. No one forced you. Don't use them to bargain with me now. I stayed silent. The air congealed. Ethan glanced at me and sneered. Ridiculous. You think giving us this house was some great sacrifice, but really? You just wanted to chain us to the obligation of caring for you. Sorry, but life doesn't work that way. I turned my back and walked slowly toward the kitchen. In my coat pocket, the red light still glowed, capturing every cruel word. The pain in my chest stabbed, but at the same time, a cold satisfaction slipped into my heart. Richard would have what he needed. That evening I sat in my room and played the recording. Natalie's icy voice and Ethan's contempt echoed in the stillness. Listening, I couldn't tell whether the burning incision or the inhuman words hurt more. But this time I didn't drown in despair. I listened like an evidence collector, a soldier preparing for a future trial. I wrote a few lines in my notebook. Date: Tuesday, 10 in the morning. Event: requested help pouring water. Reaction: Natalie refused with contempt. Ethan insulted and denied past efforts. Evidence: audio file number 1. I underlined the last line with a decisive stroke. The next day I tried again. This time I chose a different situation: dinner time. I knew Natalie hated being interrupted while watching TV. I walked down to the kitchen where the two of them were eating delivery pizza. "Honey," I said, "I can't handle greasy food. Could you warm up a thin soup for me from the fridge?" Ethan snorted. "Soup? Do you think we're waiters? This isn't a restaurant." Natalie shook her head and set down her slice. "You're turning us into slaves. Do you think we're supposed to wait on you for the rest of our lives? If you want to eat, take care of it yourself." I nodded slightly, my eyes cold. Once again, every word was caught by the tiny recorder in my pocket. That night, I called Richard. "I have 2 recordings," I said, my voice hoarse but steady. "You need to hear them to understand." He listened for a few minutes, over the phone saying nothing. When the audio ended, he spoke gravely. "Arthur, this is gold. It shows they're not just indifferent, they're openly refusing their responsibilities. Keep logging everything. Every word, every act. Each has value in court." I exhaled and looked out the window. Thick fog swallowed Cedarwood Lane, leaving only a few blurred lights. But in that darkness I felt I had lit a spark. Natalie and Ethan still believed they controlled me. They didn't know that every sentence they spoke was tightening the noose on their own future. I leaned back in the chair, my hand gripping the notebook. The fight had begun, not with fists or shouting, but with patience, evidence, and the law. 2 days later, the tension in the house felt like a bowstring, drawn to its limit, ready to snap at a flick. I knew sooner or later Natalie and Ethan would realize I was no longer the naive, compliant old man. My questions, my silent watchfulness, these made them suspicious. And then the fateful evening came. I sat in the living room, pretending to read the paper. In truth, I had tucked an old phone beneath the cushion, its recorder quietly running. Natalie came in, her eyes probing. "Dad, you've been making a lot of calls. Who are you talking to?" I looked up and smiled calmly. "Old friends checking on my health." Nothing big. Ethan came downstairs, squinting at me. "Old friends? Or a lawyer? Don't think we don't know what you're plotting." His tone was mocking, but panic flickered underneath. I folded the paper and answered slowly. "People are only afraid when they've done wrong. If you've done nothing, why worry about whom I speak to?" The words twisted like a knife. Natalie flushed, lunged forward, and yanked the phone from my hand. "Give me that! What are you hiding?" She unlocked it and scrolled. I didn't stop her. I only watched, eyes cold. Ethan was different. He rushed in, grabbed my arm, and searched my coat. In an instant, I heard a tiny click. The recorder ripped free. He held it up, his face draining. "What the hell is this?" You're recording us?" Natalie screamed. "God, Dad, are you insane? You want to turn your own daughter into a criminal?" I stood slowly, like a man stripping a mask from someone else. "I only want the truth preserved. If you treat me right, there's nothing to fear from this device." Unable to stand it, Ethan yanked my arm and shoved me back into the chair. He barked, "From now on, you stay in your room." "Don't you dare pull this crap again," Natalie gasped, then quickly chimed in. "That's right. You need rest. You're not allowed to go anywhere until you're normal again." They dragged me upstairs and locked me in the master bedroom. The door clicked shut from the outside with a cold snap of the bolt. I heard their footsteps fade, then silence settled. I tried the knob. Useless. For the first time in my life, I was imprisoned in my own house, a home built from my sweat and my late wife's insurance. I sat on the bed, breathing hard, the surgical pain flaring, yet my mind was clearer than ever. Did they think a lock could stop me? Mistake. They didn't know I had been a construction engineer, once climbing scaffolds dozens of meters high. A cheap steel lock wouldn't stop my plan. I listened. Downstairs, the TV droned again, Ethan's laughter laced with Natalie's muttering. They treated me like a stubborn child to be confined. But the more they belittled me, the more reasons they gave me to overturn this. In my pants pocket, I still had the spare key to the metal box in the basement, where I kept copies of important documents. They could take the recorder, lock the door, but they could not erase the evidence I'd prepared. Most of all, they could not lock away my memory, my records, or my resolve. I looked at the small window in the corner where the street lamp's yellow light spilled in. Outside, the wind stirred the curtains. A thought flashed. If necessary, I would go out that way. I lay back, eyes half closed. Anger boiled like fire, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was only the first step. They thought they were imprisoning me, but in truth, they had stepped into a trap they didn't see. 2 days after they locked me in, everything in Cedarwood Lane felt like a cheap stage play, with me, the wretch, cast as the villain. Natalie and Ethan seemed to realize a lock alone wasn't enough. I heard their whispers through the wall. What if he calls the police? I'll handle it. Who'd believe an old man fresh from heart surgery over his own daughter? But they didn't stop there. I heard Natalie tapping on her phone, her voice dropping low before a thin laugh slipped out. Ethan chimed in. Good. Let people believe he's senile. The more they think that, the less he has to stand on. I peeked through the crack and saw them choosing a photo of me. Natalie typed, lips moving. I love my dad so much, but after heart surgery, he isn't as clear as before. Sometimes he remembers, sometimes he forgets. Sometimes he even says we starve him. Anyone with elderly parents will understand. The post wore a sympathetic tone while planting doubt. I pictured her friends liking and hearting it, some commenting, Poor old man, you two have it so hard, a perfect act, turning me into a pitiful burden while they played dutiful spouses. Ethan laughed with glee. Great! He's got no recorder, no phone. What can he argue with? Let him flail. The more he talks, the crazier he'll seem. Natalie nodded, eyes gleaming with cold ruthlessness. Yeah. And tonight we call the police. Say he's behaving erratically and we're afraid he's dangerous. Done that. Afternoon, as I stood by the bedroom window, the thin light washing my lined face, a knock sounded. Then a man's low voice. Portland Police Department. Mr. Bennett, we'd like to talk. My heart hammered. So they had done it. I opened the door slowly. How? In fact, I had fashioned a little latch from a coat hanger and popped the cheap lock Ethan had installed outside. When the officers entered, I was no longer a prisoner. I stood upright, though still slightly bent from the surgery. 2 officers, 1 man, 1 woman, stepped in. The man introduced himself. I'm Officer Miller. This is Officer Davis. Your daughter called, reporting concerns about your health, and that you were engaging in dangerous behavior. Natalie rushed in with theatrical concern. Officers, my father just had heart surgery. He's forgetful and confused. He even thinks we starve him and lock him up. We're worried he might harm himself. Ethan piled on. That's right. He imagines things. The other day, he hid a recorder and talked to himself. Clearly not lucid anger flared, but I held it down. I knew if I exploded, I'd fall into their script. I took a deep breath and spoke evenly. Officers, I am fully lucid. I am Arthur Bennett, 67 years old, a construction engineer of 40 years. After surgery, my memory is intact. What my daughter and son-in-law are saying is a pretext to cover up their cruel treatment of me. Officer Davis tilted her head, eyes probing. Do you have evidence for what you're saying, Mr. Bennett? I clenched my fist. The recorder had been taken, but I still had my written log, and neighbor Samuel Carter had witnessed things. I answered, "Yes. I have detailed notes, and I have a witness. But right now, everything is being hidden. Please give me time to provide it." Miller sighed and looked at Natalie. "You say your father is confused, but I hear him speaking clearly. Still, this is a family matter. We can't stay here forever." Natalie suddenly burst into tears and gripped Davis's hand. "Please understand. He's my father. We only want to care for him. But he thinks we're the enemy." The officers looked at each other, then turned back to me. "Mr. Bennett, we advise you to stay calm and avoid conflict. If this continues, we may have to request a mental health evaluation." I understood. They didn't believe me yet, or didn't have a strong enough reason to. This was gaslighting, turning me from victim into the unstable one in outsiders' eyes. I pressed my lips together and nodded. "I understand. Thank you for coming." When the police left, Natalie dabbed away her fake tears, turned to me and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "See? Everyone's on our side. You're only making yourself a joke." I stared straight into her eyes without blinking. I didn't need to argue. I said only one sentence, quiet but firm. "One day this lie will come back to bite you." Then I turned away and walked to my room, anger blazing. They had won a round with their script, but I knew I still had a path. I had to get out, recover the evidence, and show the world the truth. The door shut behind me with a dry click. But this time it wasn't just the inside latch. Ethan slid another lock on the outside, metal clacking tight, making it clear I'd lost my shortcut. I tried the knob and pounded. The sounds just thudded through the sealed room. Pain stabbed my chest, not only from the incision, but from the fury of being a prisoner in my own home. In desperation, an idea flared. I turned to the window, the pain looking straight toward Joshua Palmer's house, the kindly neighbor who had lived on Cedarwood Lane for years. I remembered how, almost every afternoon at about 5:30, he watered the rose bushes without fail. If I wait, maybe there's hope, I told myself, clenching a trembling hand. When the clock crept toward 5:30, I hid behind the curtain and saw Joshua hunched with the hose, moving along the hedge. I hurried to the desk, tore out a small notebook page, and scrawled in a shaky pool of light, "Joshua, call the police. My daughter and son-in-law have locked me in the room and taken all phones. I am in danger," heart pounding. I tore the page, tucked it in the notebook so it wouldn't fly away, took a breath, and hurled it out the window. The notebook landed with a thud at the edge of the yard. Joshua glanced up, startled, and then quickly recognized my signal. We met eyes and exchanged gestures. He checked that Natalie and Ethan were nowhere nearby, then strode over and picked it up. His expression changed as he read. I saw his hand tighten. Then he nodded firmly at me across the fence. He had spoken with me enough times to know I wasn't delusional. Besides, Natalie's recent "my father's confused" posts had already struck him as odd. Now the pieces fit. Within minutes, Joshua retreated to his porch and pulled out his phone. I even faintly heard his voice carry over, "An elderly man has been unlawfully confined by his children. The address is 214 Cedarwood Lane. He just had heart surgery. Please come immediately." About 30 minutes later, a knock sounded and a clear voice followed. "Portland Police Department, we'd like to talk." Hope flashed in my chest, but immediately Ethan piped up, quick as a fox. "I'll bring Dad down." I heard his feet thunder up the stairs, keys clacking in the lock. The door flew open, and he wore a mask of concern, slipping an arm around me and murmuring, "You're weak. Let me help you." In front of the officers, he transformed into the dutiful son-in-law, while Natalie dabbed a theatrical tear, the perfect picture of devotion. They led me to the living room sofa, facing the two officers. "Good afternoon. I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Ramirez," the male officer said. "We received a report about the safety and health of an older adult." Natalie spoke at once, voice trembling. Thank you for coming so quickly. My father. After heart surgery, he's often paranoid. He says we lock him up, says this is his house. Honestly, he's not lucid anymore. I lifted my head, my voice hoarse but steady. This is my house. I bought it with my late wife's life insurance. They locked my door and took my phone, and I had to beg a neighbor for help. Otherwise, I'd still be locked up. For an instant, Daniel's gaze sharpened. Natalie and Ethan exchanged a nervous glance. Ramirez cut in, gentler. Mr. Bennett, do you have any evidence? Recordings, messages, photos? I went still. I had nothing in hand. Only my memory and my words. But I would not fold. If I'm mistaken, why is my phone in their possession? Why did I have to write a note and throw it out the window to ask my neighbor for help? The room went quiet. Natalie bit her lip and mumbled, The phone? You left it on the counter. We were just charging it for you. But Daniels had already clocked her hesitation. All right, he said, voice firm. We need to speak privately with Mr. Bennett and verify the neighbor's statement from Joshua Palmer. For the first time since I was discharged, a real light appeared in my heart. When Officer Daniels asked to verify with the neighbor, I saw Ethan falter. Fear flashed in his eyes before he hid it behind a thin smile. Natalie tried to look composed, but her hand clenched the hem of her blouse. I knew their play was starting to unravel. We need to speak with Mr. Joshua Palmer next door, Daniel said. Ramirez added, It'll take only a few minutes. Please wait here. Natalie started to rise. I'll take you. Joshua is my father's friend, but he may have misunderstood. No need, Daniels cut in. We'll go ourselves. I caught Natalie's eyes in that moment, a flicker of confusion and fear, as though all their careful staging were slipping away. 5 minutes later, I sat quietly on the sofa, listening to the knock on Joshua's door next door. It opened, and his warm baritone floated out. Officers, good afternoon. How can I help? Ramirez opened her notebook. Mr. Bennett told us you received a distress signal from his window. Joshua paused, then lowered his voice, resolute. Yes. This afternoon I saw Mr. Bennett at the upstairs window, throwing down a notebook. Inside was a message. My daughter and son-in-law have locked me in and taken all phones. Please call the police. I called 911 at once. Daniels nodded. Do you still have the notebook? Joshua raised his hand. A brown leather notebook, a page filled with shaky but clear lines. Here it is. The signature and handwriting, I'm certain they're his. I've seen him write notes for the mail many times. The officers exchanged a look. Ramirez asked, Mr. Palmer, had you noticed anything unusual earlier? Joshua frowned, more serious. I saw Facebook posts from Natalie saying her father was confused after surgery, implying he imagined things. I've known Mr. Bennett long enough to know he isn't the type to lose his mind. Those posts felt off, like they were setting the story in advance to cover something. When Daniels returned holding the notebook, his neutrality was gone. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, he said, fixing on Natalie and Ethan, the neighbor's statement and this physical evidence suggest this is more serious than we initially thought. Ethan snapped, voice sharp. This is absurd. An old sick man tosses a notebook out a window, and everyone treats it as truth? What about us, the ones caring for him every day? Daniels didn't flinch. We'll file a report with this evidence. If you have additional statements, you can provide them later. Right now, I need to ensure Mr. Bennett's safety. Natalie's eyes filled, and she sank into a chair. Ethan ground his teeth, fists balled. I knew they realized the board was turning. Daniels closed the notebook and placed it in my hands. Mr. Bennett, this will be a key exhibit. Keep it safe. Don't let anyone else touch it. Tomorrow we'll return to take an official copy for the file. I took the envelope, my hands trembling, but my grip firm. Natalie and Ethan stared, their eyes burning with anger, but in front of the police they could do nothing. After the two officers left, promising to return the next day for formal statements, the living room thickened with tension. No more fake tears. Natalie snapped her head up, her voice like ice. You think you've won? This is our house. The police may suspect, but the deed still has our names on it. I sat tall, unshaken. Yes, the deed bears your names. But don't forget, my lawyer added a reversion clause, and now the evidence of your cruelty is undeniable. You've already tied the noose around your own necks. Natalie's gaze wavered. Ethan shot me a look of raw hatred, but the smirk was gone. Deep down they knew the battle was no longer safe ground. That night I sat in my room, the notebook beside Margaret's photo. The lamp cast soft gold over the wrinkled page. I whispered, "Do you see, Margaret?" Someone has begun to listen. The first step has succeeded. Yet I knew the road ahead would be long, and Natalie and Ethan would not surrender easily. The next morning, Portland's light streamed through the curtains, striking my hollowed face. I had barely slept a few hours. In my mind, their words still echoed. This is our house. I knew if I didn't act now, they would keep pressing me down, branding me the senile old man to the world. At 8 sharp, I put on my coat, clutching my notes and the notebook that had saved me. I said nothing to them, simply walked to the door. Natalie glanced up from the kitchen as if to speak, but the hardness in my eyes froze her. Ethan glared, a crooked smile on his lips. He thought I was powerless beyond complaints. He would soon learn otherwise. Attorney Richard Hale welcomed me into his familiar office, shelves lined with files, the soft yellow light calm against the storm inside me. He frowned. "Arthur, you look worse than last time. What happened?" I placed the notebook and a printed copy of Natalie's Facebook post on his desk. My voice was low but steady. "They locked me up again." Took my phone. I had to write a note and throw it out the window for Joshua to call the police. The officers came and they saw the cracks in their act. Richard adjusted his glasses, scanning the notebook lines, and then nodded. "Good. This is our first piece of physical evidence. Coupled with Joshua's testimony, you now have grounds to prove unlawful confinement and elder abuse. This is crucial." I leaned forward. "Richard, I want this charade ended. You once spoke of the reversion clause. Now is the time." He opened a thick file, nodding. "Yes. In 2020, when we signed the transfer of Cedarwood Lane, I inserted a reversion clause to protect you. It states clearly, if the recipients act with cruelty, abuse, or fail to provide reasonable care, ownership can revert to you. Oregon law upholds it." My heart pounded. For years I had dismissed that clause as formality. Now it gleamed like a sword of justice. Richard continued, "I will draft a notice of revocation of gift deed. Within 30 days of filing, they must vacate. If they resist, we sue in civil court. And I believe with the evidence you hold, the notebook, Joshua's testimony, the police report, we will win." I fell silent, picturing Margaret. I imagined her in the corner of the room, smiling gently. "Arthur, protect our daughter, but also protect yourself." Tears stung my eyes. I let them turn your house into a prison. "But now I will take it back, lawfully." Richard laid a hand on my shoulder. "Arthur, this won't just be a legal battle. It will be a spiritual one. They'll resist, lie, cry, even threaten. Are you ready?" I met his gaze. "For 50 years I gave everything to family. Now I'll do one last thing for justice." We signed the documents, each stroke of my pen slicing the toxic bond to Natalie and Ethan. When Richard stamped the envelope with a red seal, the weight on my chest lifted. "Tomorrow," he said, "my office will serve the official notice of revocation to Cedarwood Lane. They'll have 72 hours to vacate. And Arthur," his eyes flashed sharp, "I will personally oversee it. They won't cheat us again." On the bus ride home, I held the file tight, each word burning in my mind. Revocation, breach of duty, unlawful confinement. The house bought with Margaret's blood money, the house I thought was Natalie's future, would return to its rightful owner. I pictured 3 days ahead. Natalie's tears, Ethan's rage, all echoing hollow. and I would stand tall, holding the legal decree aloft, declaring, "This is my house, and I have taken it back." That night, I sat under the lamplight, Margaret's photo before me. I touched the bust frame, smiling faintly. "My love, the battle has begun, and this time I won't lose." Tuesday morning, Cedarwood Lane was heavy, like air before a storm. I sat at the dining table, before me the thick envelope Richard had prepared. Notice of revocation of gift deed. The paper was crisp, each line a hammer blow against Natalie and Ethan's arrogance. At 9 sharp, the doorbell rang. A man in a black suit stood with a briefcase, voice formal. "I have documents to serve to Natalie Richardson and Ethan Richardson." Natalie came from the living room, defiance still on her face, but as she read the first lines, her skin paled. Ethan snatched the papers, scanned, then slammed them on the table, growling, "Nonsense. This is our house. You have no rights." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "Wrong, Ethan. This is my house. I gave you a chance, and you chose locks, lies, and false posts calling me senile. The reversion clause is no joke, and as of now, it's in motion." Natalie burst into tears. "Dad, are you really doing this? You'd throw your daughter onto the street?" I locked eyes with her, the same eyes that once sparkled with childhood joy. "I gave you a home with your mother's life insurance. You turned it into my prison. Don't call me cruel. The betrayal is yours." Ethan could not sit still. He immediately picked up the phone, calling every contact he had, his voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "We're being slandered by my father-in-law. He just had heart surgery. He's not in his right mind. Now he's hiring a lawyer, trying to kick us out of our own house." I couldn't hear the replies on the other end, but I knew he was painting himself as the victim. Less than an hour later, 2 distant relatives stormed in, faces tight with outrage. An elderly aunt jabbed a finger at me. "Arthur, you've lost your mind. People get confused after heart surgery. Don't let some lawyer manipulate you. Throwing your own daughter out, the neighbors will think you're a monster." I stayed silent, pain lancing through my chest, but I did not waver. I set the brown notebook, the one I had thrown out the window for help, on the table. My voice rang firm. "This isn't a fabrication. This is evidence in my own handwriting with a witness to confirm. Tomorrow, the police will take copies into their file. Call whoever you want. Truth doesn't change." Natalie's voice cracked, tears streaming. "Dad, I was wrong. I was just stressed because of your surgery. Please take it back. Give us one more chance." I shook my head slowly. "That chance passed long ago, Natalie. I warned you. Today isn't about tears. This is the law, not negotiation." That afternoon, Ethan dragged in 2 of his close friends, their expressions dark and ready for confrontation. But as soon as they entered, I raised the thick legal papers high, my voice like steel. "Any attempt to interfere with the enforcement of this notice of revocation can be considered unlawful possession. I will not hesitate to call the police again." The room froze. His friends, who had only heard his side of the story, hesitated, unwilling to cross the line into criminality. Natalie collapsed into a chair, her hair falling loose, whispering in despair, "I never thought the day would come when you put the law above family." I closed my eyes, remembering Margaret's last request. "Promise me you'll protect our daughter." And I whispered in my heart, "I am protecting her, Margaret. But I must also teach her where the boundary lies." That night, I sat alone in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp spilling across the legal papers. Each tick of the clock carried me closer to freedom. I knew that within 72 hours, Natalie and Ethan would endure a panic unlike anything they had ever known. 3 days passed like a drumbeat. The clock hands spun, each hour tightening the noose around them. In Cedarwood Lane, the sound of tape ripping, scissors scraping, and boxes thudding echoed nonstop. I sat in the armchair by the window, silent, watching like a judge. No bargaining, no pity. On the third day, at exactly 5 o'clock, Portland's fading light stretched across the wooden floor. Natalie dragged the last suitcase to the door, her eyes swollen red. Ethan stood rigid, face like iron. I said nothing, only laid a sealed yellow envelope on the dining table. "Before you leave," I began slowly, spreading the documents inside, "there's a truth you need to hear. You think Cedarwood Lane was a gift I handed over lightly. But in truth, it was bought with your mother Margaret's life insurance." The air froze. Natalie's mouth dropped open, eyes wide. Ethan staggered back a step as if struck. I slid forward the paperwork. The $370,000 insurance payout, the transfer slips, the house purchase contract. Your mother saved for 20 years to ensure that when she was gone, we would still have a home. She did it believing this family would honor it. Instead, you turned the house into a cage for your own father. Natalie shot to her feet, screaming through tears, "You're lying! Mom would never want this. You're just using her name to justify throwing us out." Ethan slammed his hand on the table, his voice dripping venom. "Exactly! You just want to take everything back and make us beggars. You think a few papers can bury us?" I stayed silent, sliding the documents closer. The numbers, the seals, the notarized signatures gleamed under the lamp. My silence weighed heavier than any words. Natalie's hand shook as she lifted a page, trying to cling to her rage. Ethan bent down, eyes darting over the lines, and for the first time his voice faltered. 370,000, the payout date matches, the funeral date. Natalie bit her lip, eyes flooding, but her protests weakened. "No, I don't believe it. Dad, you staged this." Her voice trailed, drowned by the undeniable truth. When Ethan's beat-up car pulled away from Cedarwood Lane, piled with hastily packed belongings, I stood on the porch, clutching the keys tight. The engine's growl faded, leaving only silence and the rustle of the maples in the evening breeze. Inside, I laid the papers before me. The revocation notice, the insurance record, the brown notebook still creased from that desperate throw into the yard, markers of a battle I never sought but had to win. I touched Margaret's photo, whispering, "Do you see, my love? I promised to care for our daughter. I did, and I taught her the price of ingratitude. The house is safe now. You can rest easy outside." Daylight melted into still night. For the first time in months, I leaned back in the armchair, breathing deep, feeling peace. Not the thrill of victory, just the calm of justice restored. Cedarwood Lane had returned to its rightful owner. I had kept my vow to my wife and left my daughter with a truth she could never erase. A father's love is not meant to be exploited. What would you do if your own children turned you into a prisoner in the very house you built? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next story of bitter reckoning